Carter believed the velvet box in his hand held a $200,000 diamond necklace for his mistress, a reward for carrying the heir he always wanted. He did not know that 2 hours ago. I had swapped those gems for a paternity test result that would incinerate his legacy in a single heartbeat. I took a sip of champagne and waited for the world to burn. My name is Valerie Vance, and at 34 years old, I found myself standing in the center of a sprawling Hamptons estate that smelled like a funeral parlor disguised as a garden party. The room was suffocating, filled with $5,000 worth of white orchids imported from South America earlier that morning. They were pristine, expensive, and completely hollow, much like the marriage I was currently enduring. Carter Thorne stood near the fireplace, holding court. To the world, he was the brilliant mind behind Vanguard Horizon, the tech genius who could predict market trends before they happened. To me, he was a man playing a role. He wore his bespoke suit like armor, smiling that practiced magnanimous smile that made investors open their checkbooks. "We are just so proud of her," Carter said to a group of nodding sycophants, his voice smooth as oil. The object of his praise sat on a velvet chair in the center of the room. Jessica. She was 24, glowing with youth, and the pregnancy that Carter claimed was just a happy accident for a loyal employee. This entire charade was billed as a celebration of her dedication to the firm. In reality, it was a baby shower for the heir Carter had been desperate for, the child I could never give him. I watched the way his eyes lingered on her. It was subtle, a quick dart of the gaze when he thought no one was looking. But I saw it. I saw the way Jessica blushed when he handed her a glass of sparkling water. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a disgusting display of intimacy masked by professional courtesy. The memory of our conversation from a week ago burned in my mind. Carter had cornered me in our master bedroom, his face hard. "You will host this party, Valerie," he had hissed, adjusting his watch. "If you do not, rumors will start. We need to show the board that our marriage is solid. Do not dare make me look like a fool." He had squeezed my arm hard enough to leave a bruise that I had covered with foundation this morning. I tightened my grip on my silver clutch. The metal dug into my palm, grounding me. Inside that small bag, there was no lipstick and no compact mirror. Instead, it held the culmination of 3 months of agonizing patience. It held the detonator to his perfect life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter announced, raising his voice to cut through the chatter. He began his speech, calling for everyone's attention to present a special token of appreciation for Jessica. He framed it as a reward for her tireless commitment to Vanguard Horizon, masking his true intentions with corporate buzzwords. My eyes drifted to the gift table where a navy blue velvet box sat prominently displayed. It looked innocent. It looked expensive. My heart rate did not even spike as I looked at it. I thought back to 2 hours ago. I had slipped into his private study while he was on a conference call. It had taken me exactly 45 seconds to open that box, remove the diamond necklace, and replace it with the folded document I had kept hidden in my safe. Around me, the whispers of the Hamptons elite buzzed like annoying insects. I caught snippets of conversation from the women standing near the chocolate fountain. "It is so sad, really," one woman murmured behind her hand. "Valerie just could not keep him interested. And she is barren." Her friend giggled softly. "She is just clinging to the title of Mrs. Thorne. If she had any dignity, she would have left months ago. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was the oblivious trophy wife standing on the sidelines of her own humiliation." I lifted my crystal flute to my lips and took a long, cool sip of champagne. I let a small, razor-sharp smile touch my lips. Their pity was delicious because it made them blind. They had no idea that I was not the victim in this story anymore. I was the executioner, and the guillotine was about to drop. 6 months ago, the cracks in my life did not appear with a bang, but with a quiet, suffocating snap during our 5th wedding anniversary dinner. We were seated at the best table in Le Bernardin, surrounded by hushed conversations and the clinking of expensive silverware. I had expected a toast to our partnership, perhaps a moment of genuine connection. Instead, Carter looked at me over the rim of his wineglass, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "It is a pity." "Really," he said, swirling the dark red liquid. "We have built this empire, Valerie, yet there is no one to inherit it. It feels like a technical error in an otherwise perfect system, a biological glitch on your part." The cruelty of his words settled in my chest like a stone, but I did not blink. That was the night the dynamic shifted. In the weeks that followed, Carter became a ghost in our own home. He was always away, citing emergency board meetings at Vanguard Horizon or critical market expansion trips to the West Coast. He thought I was simply accepting his excuses, the dutiful wife waiting by the phone. He was wrong. I began noticing the irregularities not in his behavior, but in the finances. As a former financial risk analyst, patterns were my language, and Carter was getting sloppy. I monitored our joint accounts and noticed that while there were no large cash withdrawals, there were peculiar notifications appearing in a secondary email account he thought I did not have access to. Receipts: a pair of diamond stud earrings for $12,000, a limited edition designer handbag for $8,500. Then, I saw them, not in the closet, but on her. Jessica began appearing at company galas and mixers, always hovering near Carter's elbow. At the spring fundraiser, she wore those exact diamond earrings. At the quarterly review, that specific handbag was resting on her shoulder. It was a brazen display, a game of connect the dots that they thought I was too stupid to play. The humiliation escalated quickly. Carter stopped trying to hide his disdain. I remember standing in the lobby of Vanguard Horizon a month later, bringing him lunch, when he stopped to introduce Jessica to a visiting investor. He gestured to her with a pride he used to reserve for his software launches. "Jessica is the future of this department," Carter announced, his voice booming slightly so the surrounding staff could hear. "She is dynamic, fresh, alive, unlike some people who are just content to exist in the background. You know, old-fashioned and passive." He glanced at me then, a dismissive look that stripped me of my dignity in front of 20 employees. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday evening. Carter had returned home late, tossing his jacket over the chaise lounge before heading to the shower. I saw a corner of thermal paper sticking out of the inside pocket. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. I pulled out a crumpled ultrasound image. The black and white grain showing a distinct fetal outline. Stapled to the back of it was a receipt for a deposit on a penthouse in Manhattan. $500,000 down. I stared at the papers. My hands did not shake. I did not collapse to the floor and weep for the marriage I had lost. Instead, a cold, hard switch flipped inside my brain. The weeping wife died in that moment, and the risk analyst was resurrected. I realized with absolute clarity that Carter was not just cheating on me. He was actively funneling our marital assets, money that legally belonged to both of us, to build a new nest for his mistress. He was violating the fidelity clauses of our prenup and dissipating joint funds. He was planning to discard me. Carter believed I was weak. He believed that because I had stepped back from my career to support him, I had lost my edge. He thought I was dependent on his light to shine, that I would be too terrified of losing the lifestyle of Mrs. Carter Thorne to ever fight back. He banked on my silence. I folded the ultrasound and the receipt and placed them back in his pocket exactly as I had found them. I would not give him the satisfaction of a messy divorce where we argued over furniture. I did not want half. I wanted him to feel the specific, crushing weight of losing everything he built his ego upon. I wanted his reputation in tatters and his arrogance ground into dust. The time for tears was over. The time for calculation had begun. I did not hire a common private investigator to snap grainy photos of them kissing in a parking lot. Adultery was obvious, but I needed leverage that could dismantle a corporation. I hired a forensic accountant who operated in the gray zones of the law. His mandate was simple: follow the money within Vanguard Horizon. Within 48 hours, the encrypted report landed in my secure inbox. The data was a damning roadmap of embezzlement. Carter was not just spending his own salary, he was bleeding the company dry. Hundreds of thousands of dollars labeled as client retention costs and international business development were actually direct payments for Jessica's lifestyle. The penthouse deposit, the jewelry, the first-class flights, it was all being siphoned from investor funds. He was stealing from the very people he was trying to impress. But financial crime was only half the picture. I needed to know his intent. At 3 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, while Carter snored with the heavy arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable, I slipped out of bed. My bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor. I took his phone from the nightstand. His passcode was still his birthday. He was too narcissistic to believe anyone would dare invade his privacy. I installed a mirror software that forwarded every text, call log, and keystroke to a burner phone I had hidden in the guest room. I returned his phone and laid back down, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The next morning, the first batch of intercepted messages arrived. Reading them felt like drinking acid. "She is clueless." Carter had texted Jessica at 10 in the morning. "Just wait a few more months. Once the kid is here, I will divorce her. I will make sure the prenup leaves her with nothing but the clothes on her back." Jessica's reply was instantaneous. "I just want us to be a real family. I hate hiding." "Soon," he promised. "She is just a placeholder now." I put the burner phone down. My hands were steady. I was not hurt. I was fascinated, because amidst his cruelty, I remembered a variable Carter had clearly forgotten, or perhaps arrogantly dismissed. Years ago, before the distance grew between us, Carter had suffered a health scare. He had been adamant about keeping his medical records sealed, hiring a concierge doctor who signed non-disclosure agreements as if they were autographs. He claimed it was just high blood pressure, but I remembered the specific medications he had taken. I called in a favor. Before I was Mrs. Thorne, I had analyzed risk for major healthcare conglomerates. I still had contacts who owed me their careers. I reached out to a hospital administrator who had access to the archived database from 10 years ago. "I need the unredacted file for Carter Thorne," I told her over an encrypted line. "From his hospitalization in 2015, "Valerie, I could lose my license," she whispered, "and you would have lost your pension fund 5 years ago if I hadn't tipped you off about that merger." I reminded her gently. The file arrived an hour later. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away from our house, and read the clinical notes. The diagnosis jumped out at me in stark black and white: orchitis secondary to adult mumps infection. The prognosis was devastatingly clear. The complications had resulted in severe testicular atrophy. The report concluded that natural conception was statistically improbable, bordering on impossible. I stared at the words, impossible. My mind raced through the implications. Carter was clinically sterile. Yet, Jessica was pregnant, and Carter was strutting around like a virile king. There were only 2 possibilities. Either Carter knew he was sterile and this was a complex adoption scheme, or, more likely, Carter's massive ego prevented him from believing he could be flawed. He did not know. Jessica was playing him. She was pregnant, certainly, but not by him. She was pinning another man's child on a billionaire to secure her future. I laughed, a short, sharp sound in the silence of my car. This was the ace up my sleeve. But a 10-year-old medical report was not enough. I needed something current. I needed something undeniable. I needed a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. I needed to prove that the heir to the Thorne dynasty was nothing more than a stranger's DNA wrapped in a lie. The game had just evolved from a divorce settlement to a total destruction of his reality. To solidify my theory, I needed biology to confirm what logic had already screamed at me. I needed a comparison. Obtaining Carter's DNA was pathetically simple. He was a man who left his genetic footprint everywhere, arrogant enough to believe he owned the very air he breathed. I walked into his bathroom and plucked a few thick strands of hair from his silver comb. For good measure, I took his used toothbrush, sealing it in a sterile biohazard bag I had ordered online. That was the easy part. The real challenge was Jessica. To perform a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, I needed fetal DNA, which meant I needed her blood. I could not exactly ask her to bleed for me, so I had to orchestrate a catastrophe. I swallowed my pride and sent her a text message. Jessica, since Carter mentioned you are taking on more responsibility, please come over for tea. We need to align our schedules for the upcoming quarter. It was the bait she could not resist, an invitation into the lion's den where she believed the lion was toothless. She arrived wearing a white sundress that screamed innocence, though her eyes scanned my living room with predatory greed. I led her to the sunroom, playing the part of the gracious, defeated wife. I had prepared everything with surgical precision. The porcelain cup I placed before her was a beautiful antique, but I had used a diamond drill bit to create a microscopic hairline fracture near the handle. It was designed to fail under thermal stress. This house is bigger than I expected, Jessica said, looking around. Carter says it feels empty, though, like it needs life. It takes a lot to fill a home, I replied, my voice steady. I poured the boiling Earl Grey into her cup. The moment she lifted it, the porcelain shattered. Ouch! Jessica shrieked, dropping the jagged shards onto the table. Oh my God, I am so sorry, I exclaimed, feigning panic. I rushed over with a handful of clean, high-grade cotton handkerchiefs. Let me help you. A shard had nicked her index finger. A drop of bright red crimson welled up. Perfect. I pressed the cloth against the wound, ensuring I absorbed enough of the sample before the blood could clot. I am so clumsy, I said, holding the cloth tight for a second longer than necessary to secure the sample. Jessica yanked her hand back, looking at the broken china with disdain. She did not even thank me. You really should be more careful. Valerie, Carter told me you were getting forgetful, but I did not realize you could not even handle a tea service. Maybe you should let the staff handle these things. You know, before you hurt someone important. You are right, I said, my voice trembling with fake apology while I carefully pocketed the blood-stained handkerchief. I am just so scattered lately. She smirked. She had no idea she had just handed me the weapon that would end her. I did not trust American labs. Carter had friends everywhere. I overnighted the samples to a genetic institute in Zurich via a private courier service. The priority processing cost me $3,000, but privacy was priceless. While the samples were crossing the Atlantic, Carter dropped his bomb. He stormed into the living room a few days later, tossing his jacket on the sofa. We are hosting a baby shower, he declared. The biggest event of the season. I am framing it as a launch for the new Genesis project, but everyone will know it is for Jessica. And you are going to organize it. Carter, please. That is humiliating, I said, looking away to hide the spark of triumph in my eyes. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You will do it, and you will smile. If you refuse, I will cut the funding for your family. Do you want your mother kicked out of her facility? Because I will make it happen. I lowered my eyes, perfecting the image of the beaten wife. Okay, I will do it. I will make it perfect. He smirked, patting my cheek condescendingly. Good girl. I knew you would see reason. He walked away, completely unaware that he had just threatened the wrong woman. 3 days before the party. My phone chimed with a secure email notification. The subject line was simply, "Analysis complete." I opened the PDF, my heart beating in a slow, steady rhythm. I scrolled past the technical markers and genetic alleles until I reached the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity 0%. My suspicion was fact. Carter was not the father. Jessica was playing a game so dangerous she did not even realize she was standing on a trap door. And I was about to pull the lever. I sat in the worn leather armchair of my late father's private study, a room Carter avoided because he claimed it smelled of old money and dust. In my hand, the DNA report trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the weapon I now held. 0%. Carter was not the father, but as I looked at the stark white paper, I realized this was only the first blade of the guillotine. The second blade was far sharper, and it was one Carter had never seen coming because he was too busy staring at his own reflection. For 5 years, Carter had spun a narrative that he was the benevolent prince who had rescued me, the poor scholarship student, from a life of mediocrity. He loved to tell his friends how he gave me a life I could never have afforded on my own. It was a charming story. It was also a complete fabrication. Carter had conveniently forgotten, or perhaps simply never bothered to dig deep enough to learn, that my maiden name, Vance, was not just a name. It was an institution. I was not a charity case. I was the sole heiress to Vance Capital, the silent, titanic hedge fund that happened to be the largest creditor of Vanguard Horizon. When we first met, I had hidden my identity. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the 9-figure trust fund attached to my social security number. I wanted a partner, not a parasite. When Vanguard Horizon was faltering in its early days, bleeding cash and on the brink of bankruptcy, it was not Carter's genius that saved it. It was me. I had authorized 3 rounds of angel investment through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. I had pumped $20 million into his dream just to see him smile, to see him stand tall. I looked around the room. The irony was suffocating. Carter walked around this Hamptons estate like he was the lord of the manor, constantly reminding me how generous he was for letting me live here. He did not know that the deed to this house, along with the title to the skyscraper that housed his headquarters, was held by the V Trust, my trust. "You are just a tenant, Carter," I whispered to the empty room, "and you are months behind on your rent." He believed he was a self-made god, a titan of industry. In reality, he was a glorified employee sleeping in his boss's house. He had signed the loan agreements without reading the fine print, too arrogant to realize that the shadow investor holding the right to recall the loans and seize assets upon any breach of contract was the woman he called passive and useless over breakfast. I opened the bottom drawer of the antique mahogany desk and pulled out a second file. This one was thicker, bound in blue legal cardstock. It contained the foreclosure notice on the Hamptons estate and an immediate termination of the CEO contract for Vanguard Horizon based on the morality clause and financial mismanagement. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice before a sharp, familiar voice answered. "Valerie," the woman on the other end said. It was Eleanor, the most ruthless corporate litigator in New York, a woman who ate CEOs for lunch. I assumed this day would come. "It is time, Eleanor," I said, my voice cold. "He has breached the morality clause. He is embezzling funds to support a mistress. Activate the default protocols on the loans. I want the asset seizure order ready to be served within the hour." "Consider it done," Eleanor replied, the sound of typing already audible in the background. "Do you want us to be gentle?" "No," I said. "I want you to be thorough. Leave him with nothing but his name. Actually, ruin that too." I hung up and looked at the 2 documents. The DNA test proved he was a cuckold. The legal file proved he was a pauper. Together, they were the end of Carter Thorne. I reached for the navy blue velvet box he had given me earlier, the one meant for the diamond necklace. I removed the velvet insert, creating a hollow space. I folded the DNA test carefully. Then, I folded the foreclosure notice and the termination letter. They fit perfectly inside, a snugly packed bomb waiting for a spark. I ran my thumb over the smooth fabric of the box. Carter wanted to give Jessica a gift that symbolized their future. I would give him exactly that. This box no longer held diamonds. It held the truth. And in my world, the truth was far harder than any stone. I snapped the lid shut. It was time to go to the party. The morning of the baby shower arrived with the subtle tension of a bomb ticking down to zero. It began not with a loving greeting, but with Carter standing in the middle of the sun-drenched patio, screaming at the catering staff about the shade of the linens. "I told you, Ivory," Carter shouted, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "These are eggshell. Do you think I am blind? Jessica specifically asked for a warm tone. Fix it." He turned to me, his eyes narrowing as if the color of the tablecloths was a personal failure I had orchestrated. "You need to supervise them better. Valerie, today has to be flawless." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I will handle it. Carter," he grunted, reaching into the inner pocket of his blazer. He pulled out the navy blue velvet box, the same one I had held in my hands just hours before in my imagination, though in reality, I had not touched it since he brought it home yesterday. This was the moment. "Here," he said, thrusting the box toward me. "Place this on the gift table, center stage. It is the highlight of the event." I took the box. It felt heavy, weighted down by $200,000 worth of diamonds and 1,000,000 pounds of deceit. "It is a very generous gift for a secretary. Carter." He adjusted his cuffs, refusing to meet my eyes. "She is not just a secretary. She is integral to the company's future. It is a performance bonus, a retention strategy. You would not understand corporate incentives." "I suppose not," I said softly. "Just put it on the table, and do not open it. I had it wrapped perfectly," he ordered before turning back to yell at the florist about the orchids. I walked straight to the master suite, clutching the box to my chest. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a rhythmic drumbeat of adrenaline. I locked the door behind me and moved to my vanity. My hands, which had been trembling slightly with rage downstairs, became steady and precise. I pulled the silk ribbon. It came undone with a soft whisper. I opened the lid. The diamond necklace lay there, glittering under the vanity lights. A cold, hard snake made of carbon. It was beautiful, and it was disgusting. I lifted it out, feeling the metal warm against my skin for a brief second before I dropped it into my personal leather handbag. I would sell it later. I considered it a partial reimbursement for the years of my life he had wasted. The box was empty now. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the folded papers I had prepared. The DNA test results, stating 0% probability of paternity, the foreclosure notice for the Hamptons estate, the termination letter from Vance Capital. I stacked them neatly, pressing them down into the velvet indentation where the diamonds had rested. They fit as if the box had been made for them. I closed the lid. I retied the ribbon, my fingers working the silk into a bow that was identical to the one Carter had tied. It looked innocent. It looked expensive. It looked like a gift. I checked the clock. Guests would be arriving in 30 minutes. Carter had demanded I wear something soft, maybe pastel, to blend into the background, to be the fading wife beside the glowing mistress. I walked to my closet and pushed past the beige and pale pink dresses he approved of. My hand landed on a garment bag in the back. I unzipped it. The dress was red, not a polite burgundy, but a screaming, vibrant scarlet. It was tight, structural, and commanded attention. It was the color of blood, of warning signs, of war. I zipped myself into it. I applied a layer of lipstick in a matching shade. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was not Valerie the victim. She was Valerie the victor. I picked up the box and walked out of the room, descending the grand staircase. I saw the foyer filling up with the elite of New York. In the center of the room, Jessica stood near the entrance, one hand resting protectively on her baby bump. She was wearing white, looking every bit the innocent Madonna she was pretending to be. She was laughing at something a guest said, her head thrown back, radiating the confidence of a woman who thought she had won the lottery. Carter stood beside her, his hand hovering near the small of her back, close enough to be possessive but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my heels clicking sharply on the marble. The sound cut through the ambient chatter. Heads turned. The red dress did its job. Silence rippled outward from the staircase as people noticed me. Carter looked up. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure fury. He excused himself from the guests and intercepted me before I could reach the main floor. He gripped my elbow, his fingers digging in hard. "What? What the hell are you wearing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I told you pastels. You look like a whore." "How?" I smiled at him, a wide, dazzling smile that did not reach my eyes. "I thought I would dress for the occasion. Darling, it is a celebration, isn't it?" He glared at me, his jaw working. "You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to upstage her." "I am just the hostess." "Carter," I said, pulling my arm free from his grip. "I am just here to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve." He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. Do not ruin this for me. If you embarrass me today, Valerie, you will regret it for the rest of your miserable life." "I would not dream of it," I whispered back. "I am just going to put your gift on the table." I walked past him, holding the blue velvet box like a holy relic, and placed it right in the center of the gift table, directly under the spotlight. The trap was set. Now. I just had to wait for the mouse to take the cheese. The garden was buzzing with the specific frequency of greed that only wealthy people could emit. It was a symphony of clinking crystal and forced laughter as the investors and partners of Vanguard Horizon circled Carter like sharks smelling blood in the water. They patted his back and laughed too loudly at his jokes, desperate to secure their positions in the upcoming fiscal quarter. They did not care about the baby or the mother. They only cared about the proximity to power. Jessica moved through the crowd as if she already owned the deed to the estate. She accepted gifts wrapped in silver paper and soaked up the compliments with a feigned modesty that made my stomach turn. Every few minutes, she would glance in my direction. It was not a look of fear or guilt. It was pity. She looked at me with the soft, condescending eyes one might use for a stray dog that was about to be put down. She thought she was replacing me. She thought she had won. Near the buffet, I spotted Carter's mother, Beatrice. She was holding a martini and holding court with a group of elderly socialites. As I passed by with a tray of appetizers, I heard her voice cut through the air. "It is just such a relief," Beatrice said, not bothering to lower her volume. "Jessica is a breath of fresh air. Finally, a woman who knows, well, a woman who knows her biological duty, unlike some people who are just ornamental." She cast a withering look in my direction, dismissing my entire existence with a wave of her diamond-clad hand. I saw a few of my old colleagues from my days in risk analysis near the bar. They were people I had mentored, people who knew that I was the brain that had originally structured Vanguard's debt. One of them, a bright analyst named David, started to walk toward me, his hand raised in greeting, but before he could take 3 steps, Carter intercepted him. I watched my husband place a heavy hand on David's shoulder, steering him away from me and towards the open bar, effectively silencing any connection I had to my past life. Carter wanted me isolated. He wanted me to be nothing more than a silent statue in his museum of success. Then, the music lowered. Carter stepped onto the raised platform that had been erected over the pool. He tapped a spoon against his champagne flute, the sharp sound silencing the crowd. "Thank you all for coming. Carter began, his voice booming with charisma. Today is about family. It is about the future. Vanguard Horizon has always been about looking forward, and today, we celebrate the next generation, a legacy that will outlast us all. The crowd applauded politely. Everyone knew he was talking about the illegitimate child in Jessica's womb, but they clapped anyway because money excuses all sins in the Hamptons. I could not do this without the support of my partner, Carter said, pausing for dramatic effect. He gestured toward me. Valerie, come up here. He was not inviting me up to share the glory. He was dragging me into the spotlight to use me as a prop. He wanted to show the world that his wife was submissive enough to endorse his mistress. It was a power move designed to crush whatever dignity I had left. I walked up the stairs. My red dress blazed against the sea of white and beige linens. I moved with a slow, deliberate grace. When I reached his side, I did not look down. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then I turned my gaze to him. I smiled. It was a calm, serene smile. For a fraction of a second, I saw Carter falter. A flicker of unease passed through his eyes as if he suddenly realized he was standing next to a predator. Not prey, but his ego dismissed the warning instantly. And now, Carter announced, regaining his composure, I have a special presentation, a gift to honor the mother of this new beginning. Jessica, please join us. Jessica squealed with delight, feigning surprise as she made her way up the stairs, holding her belly with both hands. The guests cheered. A drone hovered overhead, live streaming the event to the company's social media platforms. This gift, Carter said, his voice thick with emotion, is the foundation stone for our future. He turned to me, snapping his fingers impatiently. Valerie, the box. I picked up the navy blue velvet box from the small table beside me. I felt the weight of the papers inside shifting slightly. I turned to Carter. I did not tremble. I did not hesitate. I looked him dead in the eye, communicating a silent message that he was too blind to read. Here you go. Carter, I said, my voice clear and steady. I hope it is everything you deserve. I placed the box in his hand. He gripped it, his fingers brushing against mine. He felt warm, alive, and victorious. He had no idea he was holding his own execution order. Jessica ascended the platform with the grace of a woman who believed she had secured her golden ticket. Her face was flushed with triumph, and her hands cradled her stomach in a gesture that was meant to look maternal but just looked possessive. She took the velvet box from Carter, her fingers brushing against his in a display of intimacy that made the guests whistle and clap. The applause was a physical weight in the air, a wall of noise celebrating their deceit. Carter leaned in close to her, forgetting the lapel microphone clipped to his jacket was still live. This is my promise, he whispered, his voice husky with an emotion he had never shown me. The audio system amplified his whisper, broadcasting it to every corner of the garden. The crowd let out a collective sigh of adoration, thinking it was a romantic declaration. I stood just a few feet away, my hands clasped loosely in front of me, watching the scene with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a lab rat running toward a trap. Jessica smiled, biting her lower lip as she pulled the end of the silk ribbon. The knot gave way easily. Carter stood beside her, puffing out his chest, his face arranged in a mask of benevolent generosity. He was waiting for the gasp, the sparkle of diamonds, the moment the crowd would fawn over his wealth. The lid of the box snapped open. Jessica's jaw dropped. The expectant smile froze on her face, then slowly curdled into confusion. She did not gasp at the brilliance of $200,000 worth of jewelry. She stared into the dark interior of the box, her brow furrowing. Carter, she said, her voice shaking slightly. What is this? She reached into the box. Instead of pulling out a shimmering stream of diamonds, her manicured fingers grasped the thick, folded edges of the documents I had placed there. She pulled them out, the paper crinkling loudly in the sudden silence. The atmosphere in the garden shifted instantly. The applause died out, replaced by a confused murmur. The string quartet, sensing the tension, stopped playing mid-measure, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in their wake. Carter's smile vanished. He stepped closer, his eyes darting between the box and the papers in Jessica's hand. "What is that? Where is the necklace?" Jessica ignored him. She unfolded the first document. The header was bold and unmistakable genetic paternity analysis. Her eyes scanned the page, skipping over the technical data and landing squarely on the summary section at the bottom. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "No, this cannot be." The paper slipped from her trembling fingers and fluttered to the wooden deck of the platform. She brought both hands up to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with terror as she looked at me. Carter, thinking I had played some crude prank, let out a snarl of impatience. "Valerie, if this is some kind of sick joke, I swear I will." He bent down and snatched the paper from the floor. He intended to tear it up, to scream at me, to salvage his moment. But as he straightened up, his eyes locked onto the same line that had destroyed Jessica, probability of paternity 0%. He froze. The paper shook in his hand. He read it again, and again. The reality of the words slammed into him. The man who thought he was a king suddenly realized he was wearing no clothes. He looked at the paper, then at Jessica's terrified face, and finally at his own reflection in the glass doors across the pool. I stepped forward and took the microphone from the stand. The sound of my movement was the only thing audible in the stunned silence of the Hamptons' afternoon. I looked at my husband, whose world had just evaporated in his hands. "It seems like a more practical gift than you thought. Right, Carter?" I asked, my voice echoing through the speakers, clear and cold as ice. Carter stared at the paper in his hand, his eyes bulging as if the ink itself was strangling him. He read the line aloud, his voice cracking under the strain of disbelief. "Probability of paternity. 0%. He looked up, his face a mask of twisted rage, and roared. "What the hell is this?" I stood my ground, my voice calm and amplified by the speakers, cutting through the panic like a scalpel. "That, Carter, is scientific proof that you are about to bequeath your entire estate to the child of Jessica's personal trainer. I believe his name is Chad. He has excellent deltoids, from what I hear." "No!" Jessica screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. She grabbed Carter's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "Carter, baby, do not listen to her. She is lying. She forged it because she is jealous. It is yours, I swear to God." "Save your prayers," I said coldly. I pointed the remote control in my hand toward the massive LED screen behind us, which was currently displaying a slideshow of ultrasound photos. "I think the guests might find this more interesting." I pressed the button. The sweet pastel images of the baby vanished. In their place, a series of high-resolution screenshots appeared. They were text messages, explicit and dating back months, detailing hotel meetups and jokes about the old man paying for everything. Then came the photos, grainy but unmistakable images of Jessica kissing a muscular man in a gym parking lot, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the garden. Carter turned to Jessica. The vein in his forehead pulsed dangerously. The look in his eyes was not heartbreak, it was the rabid, frothing madness of a narcissist whose reflection had been shattered. You dirty little..." "Do not kill her yet." "Carter," I interrupted, my tone conversational. "You have not finished reading. There is a second piece of paper in the box. You really should look at it." Carter's hand shook violently as he reached back into the velvet box. He pulled out the blue legal document. He scanned the header, and I watched the blood drain from his face until he looked like a corpse standing upright. "Notice of lease termination." I read aloud for the audience, reciting the words from memory. "And immediate termination of employment." You cannot do this," Carter stammered, looking at me with wild, confused eyes. "I am the CEO. I built this company. You are just—" "I am Vance Capital," I declared, my voice booming. "I am the majority shareholder and the primary creditor of Vanguard Horizon. You do not own the headquarters. Carter, you do not own this house. You do not even own the chair you sit in at work. I bought the debt 5 years ago. You have been working for me the entire time." I took a step closer, enjoying the way he shrank back. "And effective immediately. The board, which is just me, has voted to remove you as CEO for gross misconduct, embezzlement of company funds, and violation of the morality clause. You are fired." Chaos erupted. The investors, realizing their money was tied to a sinking ship captained by a fraud, immediately whipped out their phones, shouting orders to their brokers and lawyers. The polite veneer of the Hamptons party dissolved into a panic of self-preservation. Carter looked around at his crumbling empire. He looked at the investors turning their backs on him, at the mocking images on the screen, and then his eyes landed on me. The realization that I, the wife he had dismissed as a piece of furniture, had orchestrated his absolute ruin, snapped the last thread of his sanity. "You bitch," he screamed. He lunged at me, his hands curled into claws, aiming for my throat. I did not flinch. I did not move. Before he could get within 2 feet of me, a massive figure stepped out from the shadows of the floral arrangement. It was my head of security, a man the size of a mountain. He caught Carter mid-air, slamming him onto the wooden deck with a bone-jarring thud. Carter groaned, pinned helplessly under the weight of a man who was paid very well to ensure my safety. I walked over to where he lay, gasping for air, his cheek pressed against the polished wood. I looked down at him. He looked small, pathetic. "You wanted it all, didn't you, Carter?" I asked softly, leaning down so only he could hear the final verdict. "You wanted a trophy wife who was rich, and you wanted a child to carry your name. Well, look at you now. You have no wife. You have no child. You have no company. You have nothing." Behind me, I heard a soft thud. Beatrice, Carter's mother, had fainted into the arms of a waiter, unable to process the shame. Jessica was on her knees, sobbing and reaching out toward Carter, begging him to listen, but he could not hear her over the sound of his own destruction. It was a chaotic, beautiful disaster, and for the first time in years, the air tasted sweet. The sirens were not a surprise to me. I had scheduled them. As the unmarked black SUVs screeched up the driveway, flanking the entrance like hearses, the Economic Crimes Division stepped out. They moved with the efficiency of a tidal wave. They marched straight onto the deck where Carter was still gasping for breath under the weight of my security guard. "Carter Thorne," the lead agent announced, flashing a badge that caught the afternoon sun. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny." They hauled him up. The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard, louder than any applause he had ever received. Around us, the guests who had been live-streaming the baby shower simply pivoted their phones. They broadcasted the fall of the tech genius to the world in high definition. Carter's face, pale and sweaty, was zoomed in on thousands of screens. The myth of the self-made billionaire dissolved into the reality of a common criminal in a cheap suit. Jessica tried to cling to the railing, sobbing hysterically. "You cannot do this. I am pregnant. I need support." "Remove her," I told my security team calmly. She is trespassing. Two guards grabbed her arms. As they dragged her toward the gate, she screamed for Carter, then for help, and finally, just in incoherent terror, I knew from my investigator that Chad, the father of her child, and the man she had banked on as a backup plan, had fled the state the moment the news of the scandal broke online. She was alone. She had traded her dignity for a lottery ticket that had just expired. I stood in the center of the chaos. The overturned chairs, the shattered glass, and the ruined cake looked like a battlefield, but for the first time in 6 months, my chest felt light. The suffocating weight of his lies was gone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the shell-shocked crowd of socialites and investors, "the party is over. Please vacate my property immediately. If you are still here in 10 minutes, you will be escorted out by the police along with my husband." They scattered like cockroaches when the lights turn on. As the officers shoved Carter toward the waiting car, he twisted his neck back, his eyes locking onto mine. "Valerie, please, we are married. You cannot let them take me. I love you. Please." I did not even blink. I turned my back on him, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond ring on my finger felt heavy, a shackle I had worn for too long. I slid it off. The metal felt cold against my skin. I tossed it into the empty blue velvet box that sat on the table, the box that was supposed to hold Jessica's necklace. It landed with a dull thud. "Keep the change," I whispered to the empty air. 1 month later, the world looked very different. I sat in the corner office of the skyscraper that used to bear the name Vanguard Horizon. It was now Vance Global. On the mahogany desk in front of me sat the latest issue of Forbes magazine. My face was on the cover, looking stoic in a sharp black blazer. The headline read, "The Phoenix of Wall Street: How Valerie Vance Reclaimed Her Empire." Carter would have plenty of time to read it. He had been denied bail and was facing a minimum of 10 years in federal prison. His assets were frozen, his reputation annihilated. As for Jessica, the last report I received stated she was working double shifts at a diner in New Jersey, trying to save enough money for a crib. I swiveled my chair to look out at the Manhattan skyline. The city lights were beginning to twinkle. Millions of little stars that I no longer had to share with anyone. I had entered that marriage a wealthy woman, but I was leaving it as something far more valuable. I was free. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. I had not just taken back my money. I had taken back my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you all and hear your thoughts on Carter's karma. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story.